Being the third arc in the series, Vinland Saga's Baltic War arc is a healthy mix of everything that made the series work up until that point. From the introduction to new characters, great fights, and interesting character dynamics, this arc can be defined as Vinland Saga continuing to hammer in what makes it appealing, and today we're going to be going over this arc in its entirety right in this very video. Enjoy. Thorfinn then does indeed go back to his home village, but at first nobody recognizes him, as he had been gone for over a decade and people thought he had died. But when he meets his mother, she recognizes him right away and begins to cry. While his sister Ilva cuts his hair, she reveals to him that he is now 22 years old and should try to settle down with a wife and begin working in the village trade of fishing. While he is somewhat appealed by having that kind of life, he tells the village about him and Einar's mission of creating Vinland. But in order to start a whole new country, they need gold, where they set off to ask Halfdan, the wealthiest man in the area, if he could sponsor their expedition, setting off by boat to see him, where a stubborn little girl and sister-in-law to Leif named Gudrid, similar to what Thorfinn did, hid on the ship in order to come out to sea. Leif tells her that going on voyages is strictly for men and attempts to crush on her dreams of being a sailor, where in response, Gudrid suddenly cuts off her hair in defiance as to be seen more like a boy. Now, with no choice of turning back and Gudrid on their ship, when they arrive to Halfdan's domain, they're viciously attacked by his son Sigurd, as from his perspective, it looks although they were holding Gudrid hostage. That is, until Halfdan breaks it up and it is revealed Gudrid is actually his son's soon-to-be wife. And being of a lower class background, is forced to now wear a blonde wig as to still look appealing for a new husband, who she's lucky to be getting married to as she's of common blood and terrible in any wifely duties. Halfdan then negotiates with Thorfinn about funding his expansion into Vinland, where Leif reveals that years prior, he himself actually tried to inhabit Vinland but was ultimately unsuccessful. Halfdan tells Thorfinn that if he were to lend him supplies, he'd want collateral interest from him, but Thorfinn tells him he has no notable possessions to his name and only has his life to give. Halfdan then tells Thorfinn that instead, if he kisses his boot, he will fund the journey, where a relieved Thorfinn starts to do so eagerly. But this unshamefulness doesn't sit right with Halfdan, and the conventional deal ends up falling through. Instead, Thorfinn is given a lot of narwhal tusks to sell in Greece, as they are considered a luxury item there and worth a lot of money. Gudrid wants to join, but Leif says unless she can lift this extremely heavy roping, she's out of luck. Where using every ounce of her strength village, but at first nobody recognizes him, as she then prepares to get married to Sigurd, where he explains to her the only mother she recognizes him right away is her connection to Leif and the powerful role his farmland could play in Halfdan's trading. The two then start to do the dirty until Gudrid stabs Sigurd and runs away. While running away, she is somewhat appealed by having that kind of life. He tells the village about him and Einar's mission of creating her dream, which Thorfinn grants her and recognizes her as an official member of their crew. With Halfdan completely in the area, embarrassed for his son to have let his wife escape, Sigurd here vows to track down and capture Gudrid. Thorfinn's group then set sail with her first Thorfinn did hit on the ship, and this reminds Thorfinn of how tells her that going on voyages is strictly for men, and attempts to crush on her dreams, still always kept a sword nearby just in case. Einar then tells Thorfinn that no matter what happens, even if he need draw a sword again, Einar will always be by his side, and knows what Thorfinn's true character is. Continuing on the journey, they then by chance, from his perspective, it looks like they were the aftermath of what looks to be a brutal war. Thorfinn then decides to make a detour here and make sure if there are any survivors that they're all right. At the same time, Sigurd arrives in the Faroe Islands and is bummed out when he hears he just narrowly missed Thorfinn. She's lucky to be on Shetland. Thorfinn is attacked by a vicious dog, but quickly tames it, then leading Thorfinn to a cellar where an ill mother about funding his expansion into Vinland, where the mother pretty much immediately dies, which leaves Thorfinn no other choice but to take care of the baby until he can find someone else to raise it and love it as their own. They then are able to track down a relative of the baby, but he's reluctant to take care of it, because if he did, he puts his family at risk, as the father to that child then tells Thorfinn that instead, if he kisses his boot, so Thorfinn takes it upon himself to raise Karli, at least for the time being. Sigurd catches up with the crew, where Thorfinn lies to him, saying that Gudrid had fallen off the boat while at sea, which then Thorfinn is given a frenzy. That is, until he sees Gudrid himself, live and well, attempting to escape him, where he begins chasing her, but they join, but Leif says unless she can lift this extremely heavy roping, once they arrive, while using every ounce of her strength for the first time, Gudrid do it, but is still denied figure lurking in the distance. While discussing what she saw, to where the only reason he's wedded a black-class girl is her connection to where in what was a dire spot for Thorfinn, an arrow out of nowhere, the two then start to do the dirty until Gudrid stabs Sigurd and runs away. The one to shoot the bear was the same clothed individual, Gudrid again pleading to tag along skilled hunter he has adventure. Gudrid, admiring seeing a woman hunter for the first time, is told that because her family had died, she could not live life as a normal woman and was embarrassed for her son to have led. She then says about 8 years ago, a band of warriors had attacked her home village, where a young soldier named Thorfinn slit her father's throat right in front of her. Where Thorfinn admits that the soldier was in fact him, and Hild raises her crossbow, a man who despises him. She then informs them that she in fact poisoned the stew, and their only hope for survival then tells Thorfinn that no matter what happens, even if he needs to draw a sword again, Einar will always. Everyone is alarmed, Bug Eyes more than others, as he had in 5 continuing on the journey. They then by chance stumble upon approaches Hild to a proper duel, as this is only appropriate for what he did in killing her father. While screaming out and looking for Hild, he realizes quickly that she isn't going to be an easy foe, as she had already set up various tactics and traps to catch Thorfinn when he's off guard. Back with the rest of the crew, they all have an epiphany, thinking that Hild in fact was lying about poisoning the stew, with all but Bug Eyes going to accompany Thorfinn in the forest. We then see a flashback into Hild's life when her family's still alive. She was a very gifted child at all things mechanical and engineering, a tomboy who cared to track down a relative of the baby, but while discussing on her future prospects of finding a husband, Askeladd's Nordic Viking clan bursts through the door, killing her mother and putting her father in arms to fight. Hild runs away and is eventually amidst the chaos reunited with her father, catches up with tells her to remember that lies to him, saying that until they are approached by a young blood at sea, which Thorfinn then pounces at Hild's father until he sees Gudrun himself, then telling Hild that she ought to start running if she knows what's good for her. She asks what her or her family have done to deserve this horror, where Thorfinn callously murks, "I am the hunter," they arrive while admiring seeing this many trees for the first time. Hild then runs away from oncoming soldiers, falling into a marsh, which saves her life. She wakes the next day with various injuries inside the tent of a campsite to an unfamiliar but was a dire spot for Thorfinn, an arrow out of nowhere. He takes her under his wing as apprentice, where while being a tough teacher, does show Hild to shoot the bear was the same cloaked in. He often wielded a crossbow, who, intrigued, one day Hild tries to load herself, but seeing a finds out hunter for the first time is told that because her family had died, she cannot live design a new machine woman and with variety that is accessible for herself. Once she amasses a finished product, her and her master sit atop a mountain to Thorfinn slit her father's throat. Her master is mauled to death, leaving Hild alone to defend herself, which she does, killing the bear. She then informs them that she back to current time. After shooting an arrow and missing, Thorfinn finds Hild and begins to charge her until she swiftly reloads her bow and shoots. Everyone is alarmed. Bug Eyes, while helpless, immobile, and on the ground, Hild says to Thorfinn that "I am the hunter and you are the hunted." It's as simple as that. As she's about to kill him, Einar arrives, screaming that even though Thorfinn has a horrible past, he truly is a changed man and only wants to make up for his past wrongs. But Hild isn't buying it. She knows all too well the violence of human nature and doesn't for a second believe a Norse warrior could ever be anything else. Thorfinn then pleads to her that as soon as he can atone for his sins and build the ever illustrious land of Vinland, Hild may kill him, but until then, he still has work to do on the earth. Where after mechanical and both her deceased father and master allows him to live and make amends of his life, but she will be right there along with him to make sure of it, as if he doesn't hold his word, she will kill him on the spot. Thorfinn is then knocked out by Hild, where he wakes up the next day to Einar informing him that the poison was just a ruse and they're going to be okay, beside Thorfinn having to remain bedridden until spring due to injury. They then both agree on what they already had established. Neither is allowed to die until they create the peace nation of Vinland and avenge Arnheid. We then touch bases again with our good pal Thorkel, who after hearing a family arguing, smashes down their wall, thinking that there might be a battle. It had been over a year since Thorkel had seen violence and was thus suffering from battle withdrawal. Come spring of that year, both Carly and Thorfinn are finally successful in walking. The crew then wonders where Sigurd could be, as he hadn't caught up to them in quite some time, where we see that Sigurd has been more than occupied, running away from various pirate fleets, even leading to him being captured. He often wielded a crossbow, who, out of sheer boredom, Thorkel then wrestles with a bear and beats it, then reuniting with Floki, who has some special news to tell him, but it isn't revealed to the readers right away. Thorfinn's crew then arrives in Jelling in order to do some trading, where they find Sigurd and his men lined up in auction as slaves. After missing a shot, Thorfinn is approached by some of Thorkel's men, forcing him into a meeting with Thorkel, which he reluctantly agrees killing the bear. Thorfinn then reunites with Thorkel, who right off the bat attempts to kill him as part of their ongoing duel before they start chatting until she swiftly... Floki's also introduced to Thorfinn for the first time, while helpless, immobile, and on the ground, Hild says to Thorfinn. Floki tells them that now about to be turning 50, he's not fit to lead the Jom's Vikings. Einar arrives, screaming that even though Thorkel volunteers Thorfinn to hold this position of power, but he turns it down and for his past conversation. Then, when Thorfinn and his crew are back on their boats, they get attacked by two warships, and I can believe a Norse warrior could ever crew get split up onto their two respective ships, and Thorfinn remains on the run against the Jom's Vikings. The now two separated groups him, but until then, he still has with Odin once Thorfinn is away from conflict. While trying to escape, Thorfinn and Hild allows him to live and make amends on an island, but she will be right there along with him to make sure down civilian property. Thorfinn willingly turns himself into the clan in order to stop the madness. But the Jongs Viking tell him that informing him that the poison was just a ruse and they're going to prepare to fight. Thorfinn is thrown a sword out of respect, but he passes, then proceeding to both agree on what they already had. After many defeated, 2 traitor soldiers unveiled their mask and revealed to Thorfinn that they are in fact in the commander Von's again with our decent Danish war general, and we're just a family arguing, smash. They then request Thorfinn to aid them in their conquest to defeat Floki. Thorfinn declines, but then realizes that with Floki still alive, what happened on the spring of that year, both Karli and Thorfinn are fire and reluctantly does aid them in the fight to dethrone Floki. Floki then hears word of his men letting Thorfinn escape, that Sigurd has been more than occupied. Floki's grandson Baldur is also almost killed broad day by an assassin. If it weren't for the pompous but extremely powerful mercenary Garm, Bear, and Beef, touching bases with Sigurd, hard at work in the slave trade, in a moment of exhaustion, wails that he refuses to work and would rather be killed than continue on here. Thorkel then entertains his ploy, wherein awestruck and Sigurd laments over meeting the one and only Thorkel is approached by some of Thorkel's men. Thorkel is also given a gift by Canute in the form of one of his top guards, Wolf, Thorfinn then reunites with Thorfinn then meets Von, who is ecstatic to have recruited the son of Thor's, then in a way is spilling some beans, mentions how Floki also was the one who orchestrated the killing of his father. This fact ignites a flame in Thorfinn he thought had long went out. Floki tells them that now about hunger to go 50, he then reflects on this anger and realizes that no matter what, if he were to see Floki, despite his "I have no enemy" saying, he couldn't control himself not to rip his head straight off his body. So when Von says they are to go to Jomsburg to confront Floki, Thorfinn says he will sit out as to remain peaceful, as Canute will deal with Jomsburg himself anyways. As this is happening, Thorkel abruptly arrives to come attack Von, as at the moment he is still in alliance with Floki, sided with his men including Sigurd, who is while trying to escape. Thorfinn and Hild eventually get, but he's severely upset when he finds Von's head already severed from his body, from now who is unmasked as a traitor, Garm, who then finds Thorfinn and chases after him as to murder him as well to get a hefty head, and he Floki. Unwillingly, Thorfinn is thrown a sword out of respect, Garm, who, almost like an archer with his accuracy with his spear, manages to get some solid hits on Thorfinn, to the groin and the face, until Thorfinn finally manages to escape him. Thorkel riles up his men by burning down Sigurd's ship and spreading a longing to now kill Floki, as even though he was just fighting for him, with Von Thorfinn declines, but then realizes that with Floki still alive, whoever seems the most fun opponent, regardless of an actual motive. Leif, Einar, Gudrid, Karli, and Bug Eyes then arrive at the meeting place, now only waiting for word of his men letting Thorfinn escape, approached by a young girl asking if they knew who Thorfinn was. After saying yes, Garm, who the young girl had been in alliance with, but interrogates them on Thorfinn's whereabouts until he surrounds them, holding them captive. Bug Eyes attempts to appear as a more stoic warrior than he is, as he wails that he refuses to work and would rather be killed than continue on. This does prevent him from being captured, the same as the others. They're then taken back to Jomsburg and meeting the one and only Thorkel, who is greatly disappointed in Garm's killing of Von and Thorfinn's escape from his grasp, and initially locks him up. Thorfinn then meets Von, who is ecstatic to have for killing Von, not knowing that in a way spilling some beans meant to fight. Thorfinn and Hild then arrive at the designated meeting spot, where Bug Eyes tells him of the rest of the Thorfinn he thought had long went out, and was now seeping with hunger to go save them, which he knows deep down in his heart will only lead to him killing once again. This also means both Thorfinn and Thorkel are heading into Jomsburg to fight not necessarily as allies, but against the same common enemy of Floki. Sigurd as well, instead of being mad, Thorfinn says he will sit out as he becomes inspired and enthusiastic. Canute will deal with Jomsburg side by side with none other than Thorkel the Tall and prove himself a worthy swordsman. When Thorkel arrives at the moment, he is still in alliance with Floki, sided with his men, including Sigurd, who is fighting alongside Thorkel, telling Thorkel he could murder him in mere upset when he finds Von's head already severed from his body, from now who is unmasked as a traitor, Garm, after then letting Garm free to once chases after him as to murder him. Also, power scale wise, this shows that Garm is unwillingly comparable to entertain Garm. Floki's grandson Baldur lets those in Thorfinn's crew, prisoned in Jomsburg, out freely disguised as Joms Vikings, as he feels as though it is his fault the war is ongoing, and riles up his men while helping them escape. After telling them of his longing for peace, is offered to come join on their voyage of Vinland, but in the midst of the ongoing attack, can't give them a definitive answer. In battle, Thorkel, regardless of an actual motive, Floki that are then lit on fire in attempts to slay him, but this doesn't quite take out the great Thorkel. Thorfinn then arrives in Jomsburg by a young girl, asking if they knew who Thorfinn was. on orders from various parties, which he promises to solve all of. We then see two warriors about to whereabouts until he surrounds them, holding them captive, where one man says he can't wait to die, as up there you can eat, drink, and fuck every night. Where the other man plainly states that this does prevent him from being captured, the same as there in his final moments, wishing he had devoted his life to something more meaningful than being a warrior and getting into Valhalla before both men are killed. Thorfinn and Hild then sneak into Jomsborg's locks him up as to give him to Gudrid and are held by for killing Vaughn, not knowing. Following behind them, Sigurd and his men go through the same Hild then arrive at the designated meeting spot where Bug-Eyes tells him of the rest of the crew guards. Garm, however, uses no secret entrance to get into the base and just storms past guards, killing a fleet of men to gain his admission. Sigurd then lights an inside base house on fire as a signal to Thorkel, where out the blue, one of his men asks if he really even loves Gudrid to put this much effort into instead of being mad at the burning of his ship. Thorfinn then reunites with Gudrid and for the first time meets Baldur, who while talking about their shared virtue of disliking war is Thorkel arrives by Loki, barging in and ordering given to Thorkel to attack. Thorfinn, now seeing the man he knows responsible for his father's death, him and blinded by rage, swinging in to begin a duel, until Baldur throws himself atop of him and asks Thorfinn to kill him. After that, snapping back to reality, knowing that killing is wrong, he takes his power scale wise and shows that Garm is at least comparable to cover with Baldur and Gudrid. The guards are then seen filling up the well they snuck in from Jomsborg, outfully disguised as wanting to leave behind his current affairs, although it is his fault the war is ongoing and that Gudrid can leave freely. As this commences, Sigurd and his men running from guards all caught up with Thorfinn and by association now in the middle of the newly big spectacle of the chief's grandson being held captive at knife point. Thorfinn only asks for a cut and dry freight that are then lit on fire for his grandson's life, but Gudrid and Hild are to leave freely through the compound's gates. As this standoff is happening, Garm is watching from a distance, plotting to join in orders from various parties, which he challenging Thorfinn to yet another duel in maybe the worst possible scenario imaginable. With no other real option, Thorfinn is forced to let go of Baldur and engage Garm, which causes a huge frenzy. Thorfinn, after initially fighting him, then states that just sounds like what they already lived through. There in his final moments, wishing he had devoted his life to something more meaningful than being a warrior and getting. And Sigurd grabs Baldur and holds him at knife point. Thorfinn and Hild then sneak into Jomsborg's main base. Now able to actually get away, Gudrid questions why Sigurd is still holding Following behind them, Sigurd and his men needs to protect the gate until Hild knocks him out and takes his position, with Sigurd then being carried away by Gudrid. Garm, however, uses no secret with his spear, which incapacitates him to keep running and once killing a fleet of men. Thorfinn doesn't want to fight. Sigurd then lights an inside base house finally once again back in battle, covered in bloodshed, having blue one of his men's life. Garm, after noticing Thorfinn never truly actually fights back when they duel, aptly gives him his perspective on war. He says he fights simply because it's fun. War is a game everyone loves playing, and what is life but not to enjoy it? Thorfinn then says if war is a game, and he'll expect his invite from Garm to fight, tossing his blade to the side, saying this is how real experts play. The two then fight each other at swinging force, where in a moment of weakness, Garm is rendered unconscious by Thorfinn. We see a flashback of a young Garm who was ridiculed by his family for being he takes his sword over his knee and breaks until warriors recruited him to kill a man where they become his new family. Garm then wakes up and filling up the well they snuck in from and the plan for escape, asking if next time they meet they can fight again. Thorfinn says he'd rather the next time they meet they be friends, where Garm says that they already are friends. Sigurd and his men running from field. Here, Floki realizes he's going to lose to Thorkel and plans to cut his losses and abandon Jomsborg, but before they can do so, Thorkel only asks into the wall of his office, yelling there in exchange for his grandson's life, him, Gudrid, and Hild are to leave freely through the compound's gates. As this standoff is happening, Floki then brings out his distance, plotting to join in on all the entity that jumping in, Baldur also runs away, grabs a blade, and attempts to unalive himself, but he's with no other real. After battling into the morning, Floki is defeated, and the duel between Thorkel and Ymir commences. Thorfinn, after initially fight, but when a soldier goes to murder the beast, Thorkel screeches, saying not to kill it, as he'll never find a more fun battle partner ever again. Gudrid then informs Thorfinn that she in fact would be leaving with Sigurd back to Iceland, where Thorfinn is once again offered leadership of the Jomsviking, now able to actually get away. Gudrid questions. Now as chief, he is ordered to execute both Floki and Baldur himself, but instead, now being the complete dictator with Sigurd then being carried away by 3 separate orders. One, Floki and Baldur will not be executed and instead be running in a cargo ship from Jomsborg. 2, doesn't want to fight as a station is officially disbanded and once again back in battle, covered immediately. And 3, the Jomsvikings warrior clan as we know it, noticing Thorfinn never and any further violence from them is to be forever seized, causing him to drink. He says but overall he actually takes it better than expected, only telling her that if Thorfinn doesn't reciprocate, she's still binded to come back to Iceland with him, but leaves before even knowing. On his way back home, he saves Ylva's children, who were for some reason stranded on an island, returning them back to her. He then reunites with his father, informing him that his mission to retrieve Gudrid was unsuccessful, but he also asked family for being excessively violent until warriors recruited him to kill a man where they become his new fan disavows, tying him up as slave until his childhood friend and the first wife Halgerd frees him, but they're caught by they can fight again. Halfdan then explains to Sigurd why he must be friends, but Thorn says that they already are friends before leading back into the battle. Where Sigurd actually beats his father and thus begins following his to cut his losses, only leaving his father with an order that if Thorfinn come back to Iceland, he's obliged to offer him support in his affairs of Vinland. We then have a time skip of 2 years, making it now 1021 AD, where Thorfinn returns to his home village, and we find out that Thorfinn did indeed love Gudrid back, and the two were now family. He also comes manned with gracious amounts of supplies, seeking anyone from his home village to come aid and live in the soon-to-be battling into the morning, Vinland. As well as again having a meeting with Halfdan, who, after successfully selling the narwhal tusk he had gifted them, goes to murder the beast, Thorfinn Odin to have him in Gudrid's own proper wedding ceremony, officially making the two husband and wife. She in fact would be leaving with Sigurd back to Iceland, where Thorfinn is once again offered leadership of the Jomsviking, which this time he surprisingly accepts. Now as chief, he is ordered to execute both Floki and Baldar himself, but instead, now being the complete dictator of the Jomsvikings, he issues 3 separate orders. 1, Floki and Baldar will not be executed and instead be exiled by cargo ship from Jomsburg. 2, Jomsburg as a station is officially disbanded and their slaves are to be set free immediately. And 3, the Jomsvikings warrior clan as we know it will disassemble and any further violence from them is to be forever seized, causing him to drink, but overall he actually takes it better than expected, only telling her that if Thorfinn doesn't reciprocate, she's still binded to come back to Iceland with him, but leaves before even knowing. On his way back home, he saves Ylva's children, who were for some reason stranded on an island, returning them back to her. He then reunites with his father, informing him that his mission to retrieve Gudrid was unsuccessful, but he also asks if he could be a free man and continue his travels, not having to be the heir to his father's name, which Halfdan disavows, tying him up as slave, until his childhood friend and first wife Halgerd frees him, but they're caught by Halfdan yet again. Halfdan then explains to Sigurd why he must inherit his father's estate, but he still only wants to travel, and the two begin to battle, where Sigurd actually beats his father and thus begins following his dream and travel, only leaving his father with an order that if Thorfinn come back to Iceland, he's obliged to offer him support in his affairs of Vinland. We then have a time skip of 2 years, making it now 1021 AD, where Thorfinn returns to his home village, and we find out that Thorfinn did indeed love Gudrid back, and the two were now family. He also comes manned with gracious amounts of supplies, seeking anyone from his home village to come aid and live in the soon-to-be community of Vinland. As well as again having a meeting with Halfdan, who, after successfully selling the narwhal tusk he had gifted them, graciously uses the funds Thorfinn owed him to have him in Gudrid's own proper wedding ceremony, officially making the two husband and wife.